LA County ordered all beaches closed.
CDC is announcing the first instance of person-to-person spread of the new coronavirus in the United States.
We all know why this beach is empty today. On the other side of the Pacific Ocean is China. It used to be one of the most fascinating places in the world. In the past 40 years, America had a long dream about this faraway land.
The United States will do everything possible to bring China into the World Trade Organization.
That you will be a more open society and you'll be a more open economy.
Now we are waking up from that dream.
China doesn't want the real story to be told.
And this will change how the world looks at China for years to come.
And for sure, we have lessons to learn.
Is it a natural disaster, or is someone responsible for it? When did the Chinese leadership know the virus could spread between people? Are they trying to hide anything?
希望大家帮帮我们。
现在他们在追我。
And what did the communist leadership do when the virus was spreading to the world?
It impacts us all.
How did they let that happen?
My name is Simone Gao. I was born and raised in China. Now my home is here in America, where I'm a journalist. We have to get to the bottom of this, because millions of families deserve to know the truth. We need to have a clear view of what really happened. This way, future generations can be free of this disease, both physically and spiritually. The virus started from this city, Wuhan.
武汉发现不明原因肺炎的属性病学调查，
传播途径被完全。
The rest of China was oblivious about the coming danger. Until this date. 9:50 p.m., Monday, January 20th, 2020. Millions of the Chinese people were shocked when they watched this on CCTV.
Exactly, Dr. Zhang. We have just come to the topic that involves human-to-human transmission. Several days ago, we could not confirm it. So after the meeting you just attended, what conclusion did you come to on human-to-human transmission?
In the past, we said there was danger. Now, the information shows it definitely transmits between people.
Dr. Zhong Nanshan is the head of the China Health Commission expert team investigating the outbreak, and CCTV is the largest state-owned TV station in China. This was the first time China officially acknowledged that the virus could spread among humans. The question is, when did the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, know about it? On April 20th, China's state news agency Xinhua published an interview with Dr. Zhang Jixian, a government-certified first responder. In the report, Zhang recalled her first encounter with the mysterious virus. On December 26th, an elderly woman was admitted to the Hubei Hospital of Integrated Traditional Chinese and Western Medicine. Dr. Zhang, director of the hospital's respiratory department, recalled that the woman had severe symptoms: fever, coughing, and shortness of breath. It seemed she had caught the flu or common pneumonia, but the CT scans of her didn't support this diagnosis. The next day, the hospital received another patient, the woman's husband, who had developed similar symptoms. Alarms started going off for Dr. Zhang. Knowing that the couple's son took care of them when they got sick, she insisted that he get a checkup as well. His CT scan also showed similar results. That's when it occurred to her, it can't be coincidence that 3 people in the same family had the same disease. She knew that the virus must have spread between them. So, on December 27th, Dr. Zhang reported this to the local branch of the Chinese CDC, instead of using an internet reporting system designed specifically for infectious diseases. China had spent $4.2 million on this system after the 2003 SARS outbreak. In theory, top medical authorities could know about new diseases anywhere in the country within 2 to 24 hours of discovery. Yet, as a loyal Communist Party member, Zhang only revealed this information to higher government bodies in an antiquated manner. She told the party line to hide information from the public. She only hinted that something was amiss when she demanded medical staff in the world beef up self-protection. In the next 2 days leading up to December 29th, the hospital received another 4 patients with similar lung infections. They all worked at the Huanan seafood market and all knew each other. Now that there were 7 similar patients, the hospital went on alert. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, a panel of experts at the hospital drew a preliminary conclusion. This virus could be transmitted among humans. Dr. Zhang told Xinhua that she repeatedly asked the family whether they had any contact with the seafood market. Not one of them had ever been to the market or had any relationship with it. After the panel, Zhang filed another report, this time directly to both the city level and provincial level CDC. Keeping in line with her party loyalty, Dr. Zhang instructed hospital staff to keep things quiet and to not reveal any of this information to the public. At about the same time, another group of doctors with very different views on public safety also came across the new infection. He is already well known as the martyr of the Wuhan outbreak. Dr. Li Wenliang was an eye doctor working at the Wuhan Central Hospital. At 5 p.m. on December 30th, he sent out a warning over a Chinese messaging app called WeChat. He warned some of his fellow workers that they should wear protective clothing. This was to avoid infection after 7 patients from a local seafood market exhibited SARS-like symptoms. His lack of political cunning was met with dire consequences. Late in the night, on December 31st, around 1:30 a.m., Dr. Li was called into the Wuhan Health Commission offices for questioning. After sunrise, his employer ordered him to write a letter publicly denouncing his own behavior. Starting from January 2nd, the party's mouthpiece, CCTV, continuously aired a series of programs condemning so-called rumor mongers. Anyone who had shared information about the virus fell into this category, including Dr. Li. The following day, on January 3rd, local police detained Dr. Li and forced him to sign a statement admitting he had broken the law and seriously disrupted social order. CCTV bashed Dr. Li before he was forced to sign that statement. Why did state media move so quickly and make such a big deal over a local doctor's short warning on WeChat? I spoke with Frank Chin, an expert on China and one of the most diligent observers of the pandemic. Li Wenliang only sent out a message to his colleagues on social media. Why did the CCTV have such a dramatic response so quickly?
To have every major CCTV channel carry out that sort of unified deployment, unified action style of public condemnation, then it wasn't a low-level decision. It was something that the highest level of CCTV management decided, and CCTV is the top mouthpiece of the CCP. It's guided by political and legal divisions. So from this perspective, it shows that in this event, the CCP already knew what was happening, and they made this coordinated plan. Dr.
Li's lack of political obedience resulted in punishment. Dr. Zhang, on the other hand, for her party loyalty, was honored by the CCP as the one who gave the first warning about the epidemic. Except her warnings were totally ignored and overridden. We'll look at the stance the regime took instead. On December 31st, the Wuhan Municipal Health Commission announced on its website that the Huanan seafood market was linked to several recent cases of pneumonia. They claimed that preliminary investigations showed no clear sign of human-to-human transmission. They further claimed that no health workers had been infected, and the disease could be kept under control. This stance persisted for 20 days, despite overwhelming evidence that suggested otherwise. More and more medical staff fell ill on almost a daily basis, as Chinese media outlet Caixin reported. January 5th, CT scans of Dr. Lu Jun from Tongji Hospital showed abnormalities. The Wuhan Health Commission declared there were no clear human transmission and no doctors infected. January 6th, CT scans of a doctor from Wuhan Xinhua Hospital showed infection. His hospital required staff not to spread rumors. January 7th, Dr. Lu Jun was confirmed with a COVID-19 infection. 3 days later, on January 10th, Dr. Wang Guangfa of the National Health Commission declared no infections among medical personnel. The Wuhan Health Commission repeated this on the following day. January 13th, 3 Wuhan nurses were confirmed with infections. The Chinese Health Commission told the magazine Science that there were no infections among the 760 medical staff in close contact with COVID-19 patients. On January 15th and 16th, 3 more doctors either showed abnormal CT scans or were confirmed infected. Yet the Wuhan Health Commission declared no new cases or medical staff infections. January 18th, Xinhua Hospital found 100 cases of CT abnormalities. 4 medical staff in 3 hospitals in Wuhan were confirmed ill on the same day. The next day, the Wuhan government proceeded to invite 10,000 families to a banquet in celebration of the Chinese New Year. 9 nurses were confirmed on the same day. January 20th, Dr. Zhong Nanshan acknowledged human-to-human transmission on CCTV. Not long after Dr. Zhong acknowledged human transmission, top leadership got involved. General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, purged 2 top officials in Hubei province and Wuhan city for mishandling the epidemic. However, in an interview, the mayor of Wuhan, Zhou Xianwang, revealed the tangled nature of communist bureaucracy.
About not revealing the materials about the disease more quickly, this is the point everyone needs to understand. Since it is a contagious disease, it had to be disclosed according to the law on prevention and treatment of infectious diseases. As a provincial government, we have to be authorized to disclose the information.
Just as Wuhan's mayor indicated, he did not have the final say on what to do. The decision ultimately comes from the top. We can confirm this from internal government documents. On January 14th, while China's health official publicly announced on state television that the risk of human-to-human transmission remained low, actions in the top leadership suggest a different understanding. And internal government facts obtained by the Epoch Times indicated that on January 14th, local CDCs initiated the highest level emergency response. The notice said that China's National Health Commission had already drawn up a set of treatment and prevention measures. They were in the process of passing them on to local health agencies. Some measures clearly indicate that Chinese top leadership knew the disease could spread between people well before the CCP publicized this information. For example, the document ordered hospitals to train staff on preventative measures and take steps to stop the disease from spreading among medical workers. But there's more. The Chinese military knew about the outbreak even before the Chinese CDC issued the prevention measures. This can be seen in this internal documents from the Naval Engineering University. The January 2nd document ordered the university's security department to monitor visitors who were suspected of being infected with an unknown pneumonia originating from Wuhan. It further states that this order is to follow a Naval Engineering Department instruction, series number 298, issued in 2019.
The earliest and most accurate intelligence came from the Chinese military. The Naval Engineering University producing documents like these implicates the Chinese military. They very likely knew about the outbreak and transmissibility in December 2019 or even earlier.
All these instructions were marked internal. Some specifically say not to be spread on the internet and not to be publicly disclosed. And so it stayed that way. The CCP kept the 1.4 billion people of China unaware of the danger of this virus for at least 20 days, and the timing couldn't have been worse. On January 7th, Xi Jinping ordered the information of the outbreak must not damage the atmosphere of a peaceful and happy holiday. And what holiday atmosphere was that? Right at that time, less than 2 weeks from the Chinese New Year, hundreds of millions of Chinese people had started heading home for the largest holiday in China. Trains, buses, and flights were packed. After all, it is the largest human migration on the planet. In Wuhan, the 10,000 people family banquet was still yet to happen, while 5 million people were leaving the city for destinations around the world. As 2020 approached, the United States found itself in a tense and rare time. For just the third time in American history, a sitting president had been impeached.
Article 1 is adopted.
The media focus was entirely on the impending Senate decision and if Trump would be removed from office. Anything beyond the United States borders seemed trivial. And that's right when the news of an unknown virus spreading in a far-off land quietly arrived at the U.S. CDC headquarters in Atlanta. According to an April 4th Washington Post report, the CDC learned a cluster of cases in China on December 31st, but this information was not provided by the Chinese authorities. In fact, it wasn't until January 3rd when CDC Director Robert Redfield received a call from a counterpart in China. The Chinese CDC told Redfield that the mysterious illness had been spreading inside Wuhan. We inquired about the details of that phone call to the CDC, particularly when the Chinese CDC told the U.S. that the virus could spread between people. The CDC did not respond. The rest of the world began to know something was going on inside Wuhan by mid-January. But the world wasn't told the severity. On January 14th, the WHO began echoing the Chinese government's stance of no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission.
It's very clear right now that we have no sustained human-to-human transmission.
It also recommended no travel bans. The WHO maintained its position about the unverified or limited nature of human-to-human transmission until January 23rd, 3 days after China publicly confirmed such transmission. Meanwhile, in the United States, on January 18th, President Trump was finally substantially briefed by health officials about the coronavirus. He had been receiving intelligence briefings before that, tracking the spread of the virus in China and later in other countries. According to the Post, the briefings did not predict when the virus might land on U.S. shores. It also did not recommend particular steps that public health officials should take. It did, however, warn that Chinese officials appear to be minimizing the severity of the outbreak. 1 week after that briefing, President Trump placed a travel ban on China. His ban was one of the first in the Western Hemisphere.
Lives are at stake. This is not a time for
Political opponents criticized him for overreacting and being racist for banning Chinese travelers. Only history has proven that this move was neither excessive nor early enough after all. According to Veriflight, an aviation data company based in China, by mid-January, about 4,000 people had already entered the United States directly from Wuhan. In January alone, about 381,000 travelers flew directly from China to the United States. What's even more worrying is that after China locked down internally, outbound traffic from China did not slow down. On January 23rd, Wuhan was the first to fully lock down. All the remaining provinces in China followed suit before February 10th. Under the total lockdown, Chinese people could not travel domestically, but were still allowed to go abroad. In fact, while implementing strict domestic quarantine measures in February, the Chinese regime kept reassuring the world that the outbreak was fully under control, and it continued to encourage international travel from Chinese cities. Chinese state media Xinhua confirmed this on February 6th. They reported that 2 days earlier, the Civil Aviation Administration required Chinese airlines to continue flying international routes to nations that had no travel restrictions. On February 3rd, the WHO once again parroted China at the opening of the agency's executive board meeting. Director General Tedros supported China's assertion that all was well for international travel.
There is no reason for measures that unnecessarily interfere with international travel and trade. We call on all countries to implement decisions that are evidence-based and consistent. WHO stands...
According to Veriflight, scheduled international flight services from China did not face a significant drop-off until March 30th, while scheduled domestic travel was severely limited as early as February 9th. Why did the CCP conceal the truth about human transmission, then allow Chinese people to travel abroad? Did they want to spread the virus to the entire world?
The
CCP always takes its political power as the most important thing. It also takes economic operations as extremely important, since economic operations guarantee social stability inside China, and thus guarantees its political power. So, in this process, the CCP let international flights continue their travel. That way, it could give the world a false appearance of stability, guaranteeing multinational companies would stay inside China. And to the whole world, the CCP gave people the false impression that it could control the epidemic and the situation. That was to avoid all of its foreign investment from vanishing, and all of its businesses going into upheaval. So, in this situation, the CCP did not order international flights to close down. On top of that, on January 31st, we saw that the CCP was aggravated after Trump ordered a temporary ban on Chinese air travel. The Foreign Ministry issued criticism, so that goes to show that the CCP takes economic profit as more important than human life. That's not just saying it doesn't regard Chinese people's lives, but the CCP doesn't care about any lives in any country of the world.
Like what we have discussed, there are practical reasons for their silence, like keeping up appearances so foreign investors won't get scared off. As to whether they had other more sinister intentions, such as spreading the virus to the entire world, we don't really know for sure. But what we are sure about is that the CCP knew in early January that there would be worldwide competition on the horizon for one specific product. The Associated Press obtained a 4-page Department of Homeland Security intelligence report dated May 1st. According to the report, Chinese leaders intentionally concealed the severity of the pandemic from the world in early January. While doing so, they increased the imports and decreased the exports of medical supplies. It attempted to cover this up by denying there were export restrictions and delaying provision of its trade data. High-ranking officials in Taiwan support this. Chen Qimai, Vice Premier of the Republic of China, spoke about medical supplies in a recent interview with the Formosa TV network. Mr. Chen revealed that while looking to place orders on face masks, he made a phone call to one of Taiwan's local medical supply manufacturers on January 27th.
I made a phone call to Huang Qingshan, the CEO of Non-Leo Enterprise, which is the manufacturer of non-woven cloth, and I was told that China had purchased a huge amount of non-woven cloth from India 1 month ago. So the masks are out of stock all around the world.
On May 14, 2020, the FBI issued a statement on a new investigation. China-affiliated cyber actors have been both targeting and compromising U.S. organizations conducting COVID-19 related research. These attacks aim to steal research results related to vaccines, treatments, and testing. According to the Wall Street Journal, U.S. officials stated that China and Iran started such attacks as early as January 3rd.
When I saw this news, what shocked me wasn't that they were stealing intellectual property, since the CCP is always doing that anyway. What got my attention was that they started stealing vaccinations on January 3rd. They gathered related research results. This confirms that the CCP knew at a very early time how dangerous this disease was.
If the CCP was just trying to hide the identity of the virus and the scale of the outbreak, we'd expect them to relent on the cover-up after the rest of the world figured it out. However, the CCP continues to rigidly maintain the cover-up, just like in the earliest days. Why is that? What else could they be hiding? Christmas Eve. It was just a normal working day in Guangzhou, a sprawling port city northwest of Hong Kong on the Pearl River. On that day, Vision Medicals, a genetic technology company, made a critical discovery. They received a fluid sample from a patient in Wuhan. That sample contained a SARS-like coronavirus that was similar to the 2003 SARS virus. 81% similar, to be precise. Time was of the essence to get the information out. On December 27th, the lab relayed the test results to the Wuhan Central Hospital over the phone. They also shared the near-complete gene sequence with the Institute of Pathology and Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. In internal company messages, researchers described the virus as a bat-like SARS coronavirus. On the 29th and 30th, Vision Medical's researchers went to Wuhan in person to report their findings. They exchanged all their analysis results with the leaders of the Wuhan Central Hospital and the Wuhan Disease Control Center. The following day, on January 1st, one of the lab researchers received a phone call from a Hubei Provincial Health Commission official. The official gave the following orders. Existing lab samples must be destroyed. The lab was forbidden from studying new samples from Wuhan. Any existing analysis, papers, or data cannot be shared to the outside world. Finally, any future findings must only be reported to the government. Then, on January 3rd, another lab outside of Wuhan received samples from Ground Zero. The Shanghai Public Health Clinical Center began sequencing the genome. 2 days later, on January 5th, the clinical center finished the sequence, confirming a new form of SARS that had never been seen before. The clinical center reported this to both the Shanghai and National Health Commissions. They reported the disease was similar to SARS, suspected it was airborne. and recommended that public areas undertake safety measures to control the spread. But, just like the doctor's warnings from before, both government entities seemingly ignored the information and warnings. After almost a week of no response to any government body, on January 11th, the team from the clinical center took a bold step and published a full genome sequence online through Verilogic.org and GenBank. This was the first time the rest of the world could see the full virus genome. And like clockwork, the team's research laboratory was shut down the following day. What Vision Medicals and the Shanghai Public Health Clinical Center experienced were not isolated orders from Chinese health officials. In fact, China's top medical authorities expanded such a ban to the entire nation as early as January 3rd. What can genome sequencing reveal? Why were the Chinese authorities so determined to destroy the genome sequences and samples? I spoke with Stephen Hatfield, former researcher for the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases. What does genome sequencing reveal? Can it reveal the identity of the virus and when it came about?
Yeah, basically. To have the genome sequence of any virus lets you establish its family tree. And because mutations occur in different viruses at set rates, you can take an early strain and a new strain, and you can compare the changes that have occurred, the random changes, and it's almost like running a clock backwards. You can see how many new mutations have appeared in this virus compared to this older known virus. And you can run the clock back and make an estimate of when this new strain appeared. It's called a molecular clock.
Dr. Hatfield said, by studying the genome sequence, we can roughly know when the virus came about, while researchers in the UK did exactly that. On April 17th, UK's Daily Mail reported that a team of researchers at the University of Cambridge gathered data on the possible start of the outbreak. Their analysis concluded that the spread began at some point between September 13th and December 7th. On May 5th, Science Direct published a paper by a group of UK and French scientists focusing on phylogenetic research, which observes the development of specific organisms. Their estimates suggest that the pandemic started sometime between October 6th and December 11th. Coincidentally, on May 9th, the London-based NBC News verification unit reported private analysis that fit into that time frame. The report indicated there was no publicly available cell phone activity in a high-security portion of the Wuhan Institute of Virology from October 7th through October 24th, 2019. They suggested that there may have been a hazardous event sometime between October 6th and 11th. The report says during this time, it is believed that roadblocks were put in place to prevent traffic from coming near the facility. We looked into the traffic reports in Wuhan during that time period. Since the military World Game took place in Wuhan from October 18th to the 27th, the local government locked down a mountain called Bafenshan, right in the backyard of the Wuhan Virology Lab. However, the lockdown dates did not match up with the reported dates of no cell phone activity. Therefore, it's unlikely that the game influenced the cell phone activity in the area. If there is evidence of a lab shutdown, it would bolster theories that China made a terrible mistake, as President Donald Trump indicated. In fact, the State Department received warnings from the U.S. Embassy staff in 2018 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had lacked security and severe shortages of properly trained technicians. The Chinese had previously even asked for American help in that regard. So does that make an accidental leak from the lab feasible? So far, we haven't found any hard proof of either a lab shutdown or that the virus was mistakenly leaked from the lab. But we must explore this direction, simply because the Chinese leadership has revealed that something was wrong with Chinese laboratories. Deep in the mountains of southwest China, there are caves millions of years in the making. They're famous for two things: stalactites and bats. Bats were found to be the source of the 2003 SARS outbreak. Before this was well known, one woman leading a team of researchers was tasked with finding that source. CCTV reported that in November 2011, Dr. Shi Zhengli and her team stumbled upon a bat cave in these tropical mountains. The bats were hosts to 10 different families of the SARS coronavirus. As the director of the Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, this finding eventually helped her discover the pathogen that caused the 2003 SARS outbreak. She brought thousands of the bat coronavirus samples back to her lab in Wuhan, 1,100 miles from the Yunnan bat caves. Then, when the 2019 outbreak started, Dr. Shi swore on her life that the virus did not come from the lab. Her argument was that none of the genome sequences of the bat coronaviruses in her lab matched that of the COVID-19. However, two things cast a doubt on Dr. Shi's pledge. First is what has been revealed about China's biolabs in general. And second is what happens at the Wuhan Institute of Virology specifically. What are Chinese biolabs really like? I asked Dr. Shang Lin, former lab director of the viral disease branch of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. He also used to work at virology labs in China.
The key issues here is about lab safety and management practice for lab or animal facilities at the biosafety level 3 or 4. That's the P3 and P4 lab, especially in terms of the protection measures for lab technicians or the disposal procedures for animal corpse. And we know China has been very aggressive for the last 20 years to build up P3, P4 lab. And right now China has about 40 P3, P4 labs nationwide. And we even see new plans to build up more P3, P4 labs after the COVID-19 outbreak. So this is of a huge concern. First, China was relatively new to this field. Even the Wuhan Institute of Virology laboratory, the P4 lab, was observed to have security concerns and was short of well-trained professionals. And this was actually documented in a 2018 report from Department of State when they sent 2 advisors to Wuhan Institute of Virology to evaluate the situation there. And we also know the Wuhan Institute of Virology P4 lab was actually directed under the University of Texas Galveston National Laboratory. So this indicated even the Chinese scientists rely on the United States experts to ensure, to advise the safe operation of their P4 lab.
Does that mean the American lab is responsible for what happened at the Chinese lab?
No, because the Galveston National Laboratory, they're only responsible for establishing the protocol for lab safety operations for biosecurity procedures. But the real operations is up to the local team in Wuhan.
And what happened at the Wuhan Institute of Virology is particularly concerning.
So it is a common practice to conduct mutagenicity studies on viral genomes in order to understand the functions of different viral genome components and viral proteins. But one set of experiments of particular concern is the gain-of-function studies. So in this kind of studies, you can conduct molecular level of genetic engineering, or you can infect cell lines, for example, with a bad coronavirus strain, with or without genetic manipulation. and you can conduct these experiments in parallel in multiple cell culture flasks. So after a few days post-infection, you can collect supernatants from the flasks with the most severe cell dying. And then you use this supernatant to do another round of infection. So you basically select viral mutants with higher infectivities in each round. And similarly, you can conduct this kind of experiment in animal models like mouse and ferrets. So basically, you select viral mutants that can spread faster or cause more severe disease in animal models. So this is a typical gain-of-function studies. And we know Shi Zhenli's group from Wuhan Institute of Virology, together with their collaborators in the United States, published an article on Nature Medicine in 2015. In that study, they documented the enhanced pathogenicities when you had the spike of a bad coronavirus strain put on the backbone of a mouse-adapted SARS coronavirus. So this study raised serious bioethics concerns at the moment, and the United States suspended this kind of studies for a while. However, it's not known whether this kind of study was further pursued in China, especially whether it was pursued under some joint project with Chinese military medicine unit, like the ones in Wuhan or Nanjing. This is not saying that the Chinese scientists have the intelligence to design a virus like SARS coronavirus 2, but this kind of gain-of-function study is so dangerous and with unpredictable outcome. That's why it's very vital for the whole world to know whether China is still continuing these kind of experiments.
China's lax lab standards are well known to insiders, and these widespread practices in Chinese labs have gone on for years. Then suddenly, on January 16, 2020, 4 days before publicly acknowledging human transmission, the China Science and Technology Department released guidelines on safety and management of viral laboratories. A month later, on February 14th, Xi Jinping made comments about accelerating biosafety legislation at the Committee for National Reform.
It's very possible that Xi already knew about a lab leak. So he wanted to publish this law to make it look like he takes biosafety seriously. It was to be a preventative measure. So if in the future the rest of the world looks to find who is responsible, then they have a scapegoat ready. They will say that it was some person who did it, who broke these rules, and it is not a problem with the CCP.
The Chinese leadership not only banned research on the origin of the virus inside China, but they also continue to deny access to foreign experts. This has gone on for months. All the important evidence may now be gone or destroyed. Are there simply too many tracks to cover? Can we believe anything they've told us? This website is called Xilu, or Westland in English. It is one of the most influential websites about the Chinese military. On January 26th, Xilu published an article claiming a so-called culprit of the virus had been found. Citing research from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the article purports that the coronavirus is not a product of nature. Instead, the article wrote 4 key proteins in the virus had been replaced so that it can target Chinese people. And who would create such a virus to target the Chinese? According to the article, it was none other than the United States. The article claimed the virus was deployed by U.S. service members while participating in the Military World Games in October 2019. Though that particular article was removed from the website in early February, the narrative of American origin has persisted. On March 12th, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian republished a video of Robert Redfield addressing a U.S. congressional committee. In the clip, Redfield said some influenza deaths in the U.S. were later identified as cases of COVID-19. Referring to this clip, Zhao wrote, "The CDC was caught on the spot. When did patient zero begin in the U.S.? It might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Be transparent. Make public your data. The U.S. owes us an explanation." Zhao's fellow Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang later backed him up, suggesting the U.S. is hiding something. 5 months into the pandemic, the theory that the virus originated in America is still very much alive in China. In fact, if you search on China's equivalent of Google called Baidu, using the keywords "virus came from America," 66 million results come up. Late spring in New York is a charming time of new life. Blue skies, chirping birds, and spectacular bloomings. But inside the buildings, people are dying. In April 2020, as New York State became the national epicenter, the daily death toll from COVID-19 peaked at 805 in a single day. As of June 26, over 124,000 people have died in the whole country, a toll that has surpassed 47,000 American deaths in the Vietnam War. The global economy slipped into a recession on a scale not seen since World War II.
All right, so remind me, what type of work are you gearing towards?
33 million people have sought U.S. unemployment aid since the virus hit. The numbers are heart-wrenching. What makes it worse is that we know this could have been prevented. A study by the University of Southampton indicated that if China had taken measures to address the virus earlier, they could have prevented about 95% of the infections throughout the world. Some people say the American government, the Trump administration, is also at fault. They could have done better and acted earlier with the knowledge they had. After all, the whole world was at the same starting point. Why did Taiwan and South Korea end up in a much better place? That may be true to some extent, but this argument is diverting attention from the elephant in the room. That is, who let this happen to the world in the first place? To people in China, and the answer to that, and what they are seeing today, is not an unprecedented catastrophe, but rather it is history repeating itself. For the past 70 years, China has been plagued with an ominous curse, causing either man-made disasters or natural disasters turned man-made. The largest famine in human history, ending 45 million lives, was known as the Great Leap Forward. What caused it? They said it was drought. But it was really Chairman Mao trying to accelerate agrarian China towards communist utopia. Systematic lying created imaginary surpluses of crops. Government officials gathered crops that did exist and left the peasant population to die without the food they themselves grew. The CCP has long since covered up this disaster, as Chinese citizens know nothing of the true scale of this famine. In 1989, as blood-soaked college students were carried away on makeshift gurneys, the CCP claimed they did not fire a single shot during the Tiananmen Square massacre. They maintained that only about 200 civilians died in the turmoil. A recent declassified UK document indicates the PLA killed at least 10,000 people. Chinese students today don't even know there was ever a protest in Tiananmen. In 2003, as SARS swept through China, the CCP concealed how many people were infected. Only China's neighbors, like Taiwan and South Korea, had experience with handling such respiratory infections. Much of the world was left unprepared for the danger of a similar virus. In 2008, over 87,000 people lost their lives in a magnitude 7.9 earthquake in Sichuan province. Independent investigations showed shoddy construction had caused the deaths of thousands of children. However, the CCP jailed these investigators. From July 1999, a traditional Chinese mind and body exercise called Falun Dafa has been persecuted in China. The CCP has used the Falun Gong practitioners as well as other political prisoners as forced organ donors, harvesting and selling vital organs on a national scale. Independent investigators have concluded that this claim is true. The CCP still denies it to this day. And yes, the CCP once again covered up another disaster. This is what it has always done and will always do. Why has this persisted for so long? Maybe we should ask, what criminal would ever stop their crimes if they weren't held accountable? In 1989, as dried blood and tank treads were disappearing from the roads of Tiananmen Square, a secret envoy from President George H.W. Bush arrived in Beijing. He extended an olive branch to former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. Bush consoled Deng, saying that all the public condemnation for the massacre were nothing more than political rhetoric. Bush authorized the delivery of military supplies to China in the wake of Tiananmen.
Change in our party, change in our leadership, change in our nation.
President Bill Clinton campaigned that he would be tough on China. However, his tough stance quickly softened after he took office. The communist leadership mobilized a pro-China coalition within both the administration and Congress. As a result, not only were sanctions against China quickly lifted, but also Clinton helped China enter the World Trade Organization. He also granted China the status of most favored nation. Not just the political sphere, but technological and financial companies are assisting China as well. U.S. tech giants facilitated China forming into a police state with invasive surveillance. Cisco laid the foundation for China's Great Firewall, as well as an information surveillance system called the Golden Shield Project. IBM provides servers to Golden Shield Engineering, Oracle provides database services, and Microsoft provides a personal operating system. Led by JP Chase, the CCP's old friend Wall Street has channeled a huge amount of money to the Chinese Communist regime over the past 40 years. JP succumbed to nepotism when it hired children of high-ranking Chinese officials. This helped the company win billions of dollars of Chinese business contracts. Morgan Stanley investment indexes include Chinese companies that often pose a national security threat to America. Its actions have resulted in trillions of US dollars being invested in the Chinese economy. There is one particular company listed on the Morgan Stanley index that we need to single out. It's called Tencent, and it owns the Chinese social media giant WeChat. WeChat has long helped the CCP monitor dissidents. The whistleblower of this pandemic, Dr. Li Wenliang and others, were first tracked and reported on WeChat when they exposed the virus spread via this social media platform.
Only reason this situation has gotten as bad as it's gotten is because the capitalists in the West, the Wall Street and the City of London, and certain corporatists, certain elites, what I call the Party of Davos, right, have basically financed the CCP and has allowed them to get technology. Those days are over.
In China and America alike, we have a saying, what goes around comes around. For the past 40 years, America and the West have been in a state of willful ignorance, to put it nicely, about the CCP's crimes. Now the circumstances have forced us to face the consequences of that negligence. China has a rich history, splendid culture, and profound spiritual tradition. Lao Tzu would have been able to hold a candid conversation with Socrates about ethics and the laws of the universe. China's millennium-long tradition of revering heaven and ancestors echoes Edmund Burke's concept of an eternal society where there's a contract among the dead, the living, and the unborn. But before China revives those traditions, there must first be a decoupling between the CCP and the United States. I hope this decoupling will happen, because if it doesn't, there will be more victims among us when history repeats itself, or we ourselves will become part of the problem. Stay safe, and God bless America.